Hello and welcome back to another video from TrainingRite.com. In this video, we will introduce ourselves to C Sharp. What exactly is C Sharp? Where does it come from? How we as a tester, we will be making use of C Sharp.net as a language. Well, to understand how we'll be using C Sharp in our testing, let's discuss a little bit about the history of C Sharp. For those of you folks who have been following as these different languages, Java, C Sharp, and many other languages, and if you have been using them in your automation scripting, you know that these are languages, meaning that these programming languages allow you to write your scripts. But in order to write your scripts, you have to use some tools, right? So the tool that we will be using for do our automation testing, particularly using C Sharp.net, is Visual Studio, right? So Visual Studio is a Microsoft tool, right? So and it basically allows you to use different programming languages. So if I have to give you a little bit of history of this tool, or how it is being used. Basically, in the year 2000, I think, yeah, if I'm not mistaken, in the year 2001, Microsoft.NET, came up in the year 2001. So today, the time of this recording, we are talking about the year 2014. So that's a long way, right? So when it came up in the year 2001, Microsoft called it as a Visual Studio, right? Visual Studio, just the word Visual Studio. And then it went from Visual Studio, actually it was called Visual Studio.net. And then in the year 2003, they started calling it as Visual Studio 2003. Likewise, as the time passed in the year 2005, Visual Studio 2005. Then came Visual Studio 2008. Then came Visual Studio 2010. And today, as we speak, we have either Visual Studio 2012 or Visual Studio 2013. So what happened in these years? Visual Studio, as you know, it's just a tool, right? It allows you to build many things. So it is being used by different people. So developers, they go and then build applications using Visual Studio. So under the hood, when you are going to build anything, of course you'll be using some programming languages. So Visual Studio supports many such programming languages. Microsoft was famous for a programming language called Visual Basic. Today you don't see much of it, only because Microsoft has started promoting C Sharp.net, and Visual Basic sort of like has taken a back seat. But actually, in the beginning, Microsoft was very, very popular with this Visual Basic as the programming language. A lot of programmers were using Visual Basic as the programming language. So I would say, from the starting of the PC time, which is, I'm taking you back into before even your parents got married. I'm talking about somewhere around like 1980s. Microsoft, Bill Gates, he or further before 1980s, like in the late 70s, he came up with the operating system. He came up with the DOS as the operating system, right? So he started putting it into the IBM machine, and then basically started becoming wealthy and wealthy and wealthy. And as he was making more money, he wanted to diversify it. So rather than just focusing on operating systems, he started getting into other things like like software, coming up with these tools wherein you could create applications, develop software, and all that. So In the beginning, they were using just the Visual Basic, so it was Visual Basic 1, Visual Basic 2, and then that's how they named it as Visual Basic 2, 3, 4, 5. I think Visual Basic 4 basically was like object oriented programming. That's when a lot of people started picking up from VB3 onwards, and particularly VB4 to VB6. After VB6, that was before .NET. This is before .NET, because .NET came out in the year 2001. So I'm talking about from 1990s, 1990 up to the year 2001, VB was ruling. So it was VB2 through VB6, and finally, after VB6, they did not come up with anything more than VB6, so they went into .NET. So before, when you write a program, basically the program gets compiled into a machine language, and that machine language basically zeros and ones, so that's basically your compilation. So when a program is compiled, it gets compiled into either an executable or it gets compiled into a DLL. With Visual Studio or with .NET, they totally revamped, they totally changed the way these things they work. So they brought in something called assemblies, right? So sort of like an intermediate language to enhance the performance of your applications, to make them much faster and all that. So they had to revamp the whole thing. So that's why they came up with this .NET. So .NET actually, they started calling it as a .NET framework. So framework, what is framework in the context of Microsoft .NET? It is nothing but it's a collection. It's a collection, meaning it's a group of software classes. It's a group of classes. So they had thousands and thousands of classes Microsoft they came up with, and now as a programmer or as a developer, anybody who wants to build applications using .NET framework, we can use those ready-made classes which are part of the framework for us to use them. So in the year 2001, they had a .NET framework 1.0. So as time progressed, it became .NET 2.0. So Visual Studio 2003 was using .NET Framework 2.0. So there's a lot of confusion about these numbers and all that. So you don't really have to focus too much about these things, but it's good to have a knowledge of what is .NET Framework versus what these Visual Studio versions we are talking about. So originally it was .NET Framework 1.0 because .NET was new. So the framework was in its infancy stage. Then as time progressed, they started to add more and more classes into this .NET, and as they added more classes, then the version got enhanced. So today, as time passed, today we are into .NET version 4.51 at the time of this recording, meaning that Visual Studio 2013, in the year of 2014, right now we use .NET Framework 4.51. So sometimes they might ask you in the interview what .NET framework were you building your tests on. So when they're talking about the framework, then they're not necessarily talking about the Visual Studio tool. So they're talking about the framework, so you have to give the framework number. So 4.5, right? So last year it was 4.0. Sometimes if there is not a significant change, then they just go with a smaller increment of these .NET frameworks. If there is a significant change, then they revise the whole number to like .NET Framework, let's say 5 or 6. Now, as they moved from the year 2001, as this technology was maturing, a lot of classes were being added to it. So you all recall that in the year 2001, there was no mobile, there was no iPhone, no nothing, and then there was no cell phones, matured enough that they could use the software in it. There is always somebody who is always going to come back and say that, hey, you know what, I was using these cell phones since the year 1985. I mean, I don't want to debate those kind of people, so I just ignore and then walk away, because there's no point in talking with them, because you should be discussing with somebody who make some sense, who are logical in their debate, in their conversation. 1985, of course, probably there were phones. Now, cell phones, but was the technology matured enough that we can even go and then discuss about, how, what was, I mean, when any technology comes to a maturity level, that it find masses, meaning that when people start using it, that's when you and I, we can start to focus our time into it, unless you are a scientist and you are doing your R&D and all that. So if some guy, Tom, Dick, Harry, Linda, Jane, he or she comes to you and says, "Oh, I've been using cell phones since 1985, and I know." I mean, you don't pay too much attention to it. Anyway, we digress. So let's come back and talk about these things. So as it started maturing, as it was having more and more features in it, the versions got enhanced, and today we have this. All right. Okay. So you have an idea of what is Visual Studio, which is basically a tool that will help you to build, right? So it's a tool. Any tool will help you to build and do things, right? So what does Visual Studio help you to do? It helps you to build. Build what? Build applications. So when you're building an application, what sort of application can you build? So using Visual Studio. Well, we are not programmers, we are not developers, but just to have an idea, programmers, they use Visual Studio because they were building applications. Applications can be what? A client server applications, right? And applications can be web applications. And today, applications can be mobile applications. Now, you would be saying like, if Visual Studio is being used by programmers to build applications, what am I doing as a tester, discussing about it? Well, don't rush to judgment that it's being used only by your tester or your developers, because testers also, it's a one-stop shop tool that Microsoft have come up with. They say that let's not have like 100 different tools for 100 different set of people, so let's have a universal tool, and depending on what you intend to do, you can be using that tool for your own purpose. So if you are a tester, you will be using it for that. If you are an architect, you would be using it for that. If you are doing things like different technologies you're working on, then you could every one has a use of this. Say for instance, when you're building applications today, the focus of the applications is either we are building web applications or we are building mobile applications. So client server applications are being very limited. I mean, at that time, going back into pre-.NET time, before .NET, when we had VB2 through VB6, at that time, almost zero internet, no internet, so they were not using, there was no .NET, so they were using all these tools like languages like Visual Basic to create Windows applications, or better referred as client-server applications. Today, very few people do that, because majority of them, they build this. So when we are talking about the web applications, basically web applications make use of HTML. This is the a way of rendering your applications in a browser. So these are browser-specific applications, right? So for mobile, so these are device-specific applications. So when we are using the browser-specific applications, we'll be using HTML, and then we'll also be using, there's something called a jQuery. We will be using that in an application. Not when I say we will be using, you and I as a tester probably will not be using it, but we have to interact with, we have to have an idea of HTML, jQuery, and we have to have an idea of things like because you might come across applications that you have to test, and which will be like WPF applications. What are WPF applications? Can we put them under web? There's a debate about that, whether it can go under web, because WPF, Windows Presentation Foundation, so they don't really actually run under browsers, under web. So they are a proprietary way of like a client server application, but very, very rich in functionality, in user interface, meaning that you could uh, uh, be building applications that could render X-ray reports, that could do many visually rich applications, but not necessarily run under web. So if you want to build applications that you want to precisely run under web, of course these are HTML jQuery. Plus Microsoft also offers you something like Silverlight. Silverlight would be a sort of like an answer to Flash, in the sense that it runs in its own I don't want to call it as a sandbox, but in its own layer. So it runs in a browser, but it runs in its own layer. So you have to have Silverlight downloaded first, and then any Silverlight application that you want to run in a browser will run. So the reason I'm bringing up all of these things is because you and I, as testers, using coded UI, we have to be testing WPF application, we have to be testing Silverlight application, we have to be testing web application. Now, for the purpose of our to keep this course within manageable way of learning, we are excluding the mobile part of it. So I will only be covering the web. Of course, I'll be covering the Silverlight and WPF and the web and all that. So I'll be covering that. So coming back to C#, where does C# fit into all of these things? Whether you are going to use C#.NET as the programming language to test using coded UI, or you want to test using Selenium. So these are the ways of testing applications, right? So if you are testing applications, then either I could use coded UI with C#, I could using Selenium with C#. Now, C# is the language which can be used with coded UI and Selenium. So how much of C# and what of C# do I need to know? So basically, I would say that when it comes to any programming language, not necessarily just C#, any programming language, right? So you got to be knowing the following. You have to know as how to create variables, how to use them. You have to know about arrays. There are single dimensional arrays, multi-dimensional arrays, and then you have to know about how to create functions, right? How to create functions and how to use those functions. When we are talking about functions can take parameters, so we have to know as how to create functions with or without parameters, right? And then we also have to know about conditional logic, right? What is conditional logic? If statements. So if some condition is true, how you want to write that code. If else, if it is not true, meaning that else part would kick in, how we would write that. So conditional logic is another thing. Another thing that we would be working with loops. So we got to be knowing about how to write a for loop, how to write a do while loop, how to write basically the way we can construct a loop and put it to use. Now, apart from this, more importantly, now is the time that we can really utilize the power and harness C#.NET by looking into the features of C#.NET features called object-oriented programming. So a lot of companies they no longer just are satisfied with your knowledge of variables, arrays, functions, conditional logic, loops, and all that. They want you to know a lot more, like even for a tester's point of view, they want to know about object-oriented programming. So when we are covering C#.NET, we will be learning about object-oriented programming. The very important concept about object-oriented programming is, what is an object. So we will be discussing in depth about what is an object. When we talk about discussing about an object, it's not like just talking, and we will be doing everything hands-on. My code or or my course is going to be, I would say that almost 99% of the time it is going to be hands-on. Meaning, if at all, if I would be talking, of course, in this video I'm talking a lot. I'm not doing anything. I'm not showing you any demos and all that. Of course, I'm just laying out the foundation of what is coming in future. But in our classes, basically, we will be completely dealing with the code. So 99% of the time we will be writing the code, and then as I am writing the code, I will be explaining you these concepts. So we'll be talking about objects. What are objects, right? How do you basically put these objects to use? So when we talk about objects, the important things about objects is every object will have property or properties. So we'll be talking about properties, and we'll be talking about methods. Now, again, talking is not necessarily just like just babbling or discussing about it. We will be writing the code, right? So objects will have properties and methods, so we'll be seeing as how to use those properties and methods. Then we'll be discussing classes, because objects, basically, they are an instance of a class. No object can exist by itself. They come from a class. So we have to go and we have to build classes. We have to write classes, because once you are talking about object-oriented programming, you have to build classes. Now you might ask I am not a programmer, I'm not a developer, how and why in the world are you teaching me to write classes? Because I am a tester, so I don't really need to write classes. You know what? Every project is going to be different from the other projects. So the chances are you might not be creating any classes, or you might be creating any classes. I don't know at this time. I am going to tell you, this is the year 2014, and as a tester, the requirements are very, very different from what they were a few years back. It's no longer your dad's way of testing. Right? As they say, it's so the old way of testing is gone. Today they want you to know everything of everything, right? Even though if you are not perfect, you don't know most of the thing hands-on, but having a knowledge, passing the interview is very important. And how can you pass the interview? How can you make sure that you get the job? You have to know these things, and that is the purpose, that is the objective, that is the goal of this training program. We will be teaching you enough so that you can not only pass the interview, look very good in the interview, and be able to come out as a knowledgeable person, that they really have to think twice before rejecting you. Some people, they get rejected right once they enter into the door. You know what I mean. And once they open their mouth, you get to know that, how, what kind of knowledge they have. But for some, the interviewer or the group of people who are interviewing you, they really have to discuss and debate among themselves to reject you. And I want you to be that candidate that they really have to seriously discuss why they are rejecting you, because your talent, your knowledge has to be so convincing to them that they should think like 10 times before not hiring you. So how do you put yourself into that level? And for that, you have to know these things, object-oriented programming. So you will be learning about how to create these classes. Again, I will if you have taken a course with us in the past, you know the way we run our classes. Majority of you get jobs and are very convincingly rated us when it comes to like the transfer of knowledge, because that is a promise from our side. We put in this effort so that you get the best out of this training, and if we have done it in the past, we'll do it again in the future as well. So coming back, the knowledge of classes is important. So while building the classes, we'll keep certain things like abstraction. What is abstraction? What is encapsulation? So we'll be talking about encapsulation. What is data hiding, which is a feature of object-oriented programming. So we'll be looking into these concepts, not just theoretically, but you should have enough of knowledge that you would be able to understand and talk about these things in the interview with a lot of confidence, right? So while doing this, we'll also be discussing about parent-child relationship. So which is basically the topic is inheritance. So how we could do inheritance, where you have a parent, and how you could derive a class from it called a child class. This is also referred to as the base class, right? And now we will be looking into the concepts of that. We'll also be looking into things like overriding. Right, we'll be looking into overloading. Right, so what is overriding, what is overloading, and overloading of what? Overloading of sometimes you have to overload functions, right? And so we'll be in code, I will explain you everything as what is overloading. I will show you everything about overriding. We will be overloading something called constructors. So you got to know as what is a constructor, and how do you create a constructor, how does a constructor gets called, how can you overload a constructor, right? So all of these things is what we'll be discussing as a part of our C#.NET learning. Okay, so coming back to the topics that I've been talking about all along, these are the things that we will be covering as a part of our course, and this is going to be true for both coded UI as well as Selenium, right? So the C# component is going to be common for both of these, and we will see as how we could be using coded UI to do the testing, and Selenium to do the testing, of course, from Visual Studio and from many other tools that we'll be using. So this is basically what we'll be covering in those 16 hours of our training. Now, if you have already registered with us, then you might be watching the videos. If you have not, I would say that please visit the website TrainingRite.com, and basically go ahead and register. As you can see, there's so many classes that we have scheduled and upcoming. There's a SOAP UI, Visual Studio, Ruby, Cucumber, of course, and so many other tools like UTP, Selenium, and Java for testers, manual testing, and load runner, and so many others. Okay, so please visit the website TrainingRite.com and take a look of the different courses. Now, the best thing is if you take as packages. So we have 2-course package, we have 3-course package, 6-course packages. So go ahead, take a look at those packages, and this is a very small investment on your part, and I can tell you, if you go with the let's say a 6-course package, individual courses are a little bit pricey, meaning that if you go let's say with Ruby Cucumber is a $500 course. As you can see, coded UI is a $500 course. What happens is, rather than buying it for 500, coded UI would be 500, and your Ruby Cucumber is 500. Together, it is like $1,000. So here, you're buying it as a package for $699. You're getting those 2 courses, and the best deal is 6 courses for $11.99. So that is under $200 you're getting each course. So again, I think I should stop pitching this thing and rather focus on imparting the training for you folks. So thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll be seeing you in another video sometime soon.